Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. My guest today is looking for a few good men and women who, after some classroom instruction and some hands-on training, can expect to earn some really good money and a skill that would make them in demand anywhere in the United States and in most parts of the world, and be a member of an organization with about 300,000 members. My guest today is Kyle Henderson, business manager of Plumbers and Steamfitters Local 184 in Paducah. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Plumbers and Steamfitters. I know you guys are not just plumbers, and steam fitting is not something that's commonly done these days. So what exactly do your members do?
You know, I was actually discussing this with someone yesterday, actually. You know, our charter originally was Plumbers and Steamfitters, or still is. We still have our original charter. Some people have changed their charter throughout the years to reflect plumbers and pipe fitters, or something along the lines of that. We do, of course, have plumbers, steam fitters, which would be your pipe fitter, welders, and HVAC service technicians. So, you know, we'll have guys that would, you know, be working on the plumbing in a building such as this, residential plumbing, industrial type plumbing. Our pipe fitters or steam fitters would be in a coal burning powerhouse, some, you know, such as TVA, Shawnee, to the chemical plants in Calvert City. And then, of course, our HVAC service technicians would be doing about the same thing that the plumber I explained right before that.
Mm-hmm.
So boilers and chillers and stuff of that magnitude. And then, of course, even the unit in your home. So,
your apprenticeship program, talk about that. I think the first question anybody would ask is, how do you get into it? Is there a prerequisite?
Just an application process. Of course, you have to have a high school diploma or something equivalent, and you have to be 18 years of age, of course, when the program starts. So we have an application process once a year. You apply the first 10 days of July, and then, of course, we have interviews following that.
Mm-hmm. And just describe then the course of study that you would go through.
Your first year apprentices, actually I was meeting with the school board folks yesterday, talking to them about vocational education and some of the things that we need from them to prepare students for a trade, so to speak. You know, the first years, we've kind of changed the way that we've had to do our classes, because you know, typically, say 10 years ago, we may not have to teach a new apprentice how to read a tape measure, how to add and subtract fractions. You would think that they would know how to read a tape measure, and you would think that because they were high school graduates that they would know how to add and subtract fractions as well. But that's not the case. So a first year apprentice, of course, goes into a very introductory type course on some math and stuff like that, tape measure stuff, and tool identification.
You know, that's fun that you said that. My wife taught for many, many years, and she said some students can't look at a watch and tell the time because everything it's all printed out. It's like 8:53.
Right, absolutely.
And it's like, okay, how do I look at this? Especially the watches that have the Roman numerals. And we think, again, like using a tape measure, you could probably measure with your phone, I guess.
Yeah, and you know, now even the smartphones have a level device.
Right, they do.
I
know.
Like that.
And so you're
and
thinking,
the tape measures that have the automated button that, you know, that measures by laser.
Right.
You know, those are great for someone that already knows how to measure.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
And we try to teach the math, of course, without a calculator.
Without a calculator. And that's what you think about. What if the electricity goes off? What if you have another ice storm?
Right.
We've got to be thrown back on this old-fashioned pencil and paper stuff. Anyway, and that's true. It's because technology is so rampant.
Yeah. And which that plays into our field as well, because we're doing now more automated type welding than we ever have before, simply because of technology.
Now, what do you mean by automated welding?
Well, I mean, the old everybody thinks of a welder, wearing a welding hood, and they've got a stinger in their hand with a welding rod, and we still do. Don't get me wrong. The majority of the welding is still regular stick welding or TIG welding or something. But then came MIG welding, and now there's a new RMD process for the MIG that's a breakthrough.
Well, now explain that, because to me a MiG is a Russian fighter plane.
Right.
So what is
a wire welder, a wire feed welder.
Yeah.
And now there's a new process with that, and it's more efficient, it's faster. So
how have computers affected your life?
Well, like you were talking about, everything's digital. So now these welding machines, instead of having a dial, they may have a dial, but it's all digital, And instead of turning up a machine 1 amp at a time, now you turn it up by tenths or something like that.
And so computers had a big effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For an HVAC service technician now, a lot of the stuff, the controls that control a big boiler or chiller, now maybe run off of a computer software, and stuff like that. So you have to have that kind of training now in order to complete some of those tasks.
So are your classes limited? How many do you have in your apprentice program?
We've got 104.
104. And so then you begin with the basics.
Right.
And how long does that take?
It's a 5-year program. Okay, so you have certain amount of class hours and a certain amount of on-the-job training hours in order to advance year to year, and so does your pay, of course. All first-year apprentices start out at 50% of journeyman wage, and then each year is a 10% graduation.
So what are the wages, ballpark, those who
around $17 and some change an hour for a first-year apprentice.
After you finish the program, you could expect to earn
over $34 an hour.
And
that's plus benefits.
Plus benefits, yeah. So again, no prerequisites, just a high school graduate.
No.
And an interest in it.
Yeah, and certain people having certain types of experience in each facet of the trade, of course, could mean something during the interview process.
And so how does that work, the interview process? Just a panel of you?
Yes. Yeah, we're jointly administered, which means that we have an even number of union trustees and an even number of contractor trustees.
Right. Do you work, you mentioned the school board, was that the McCracken County or Paducah City School Board you were talking about?
I was talking to just one member of the McCracken County School Board and the principal, the superintendent, and talking about the possibility of a vocational education training center.
So you all work pretty closely with the schools?
Some of them, yes.
Yeah. And
I'll say where you're from, Marshall or Mayfield, Graves County.
Yeah.
We work with their teachers some. They have a pretty good program, and Marshall County's got a great program as well.
Yeah. Do you work with the community college here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, going back, you're a Heath graduate, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
Graduate class of
98.
Did you ever consider doing anything else other than being a member of this local?
No, I didn't, and that was some of what we were talking about with the guidance counselors and stuff yesterday. Was when I graduated, I made the decision prior to graduation that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a pipe fitter because my father was a pipe fitter. But I met some resistance from our guidance counselor. So I had to get permission and all that to go to vocational school. And
what did the guidance counselor want you to do?
Well, of course, he wanted me to graduate with a certain type of diploma that I had started on the path to as a freshman, and the vocational school would have messed that up. So based on diplomas and test scores, and that's what that was the driving force, of course, for a high school at that time, and that's what we kind of tried to talk about yesterday, was trying to make vocational classes traditional, on a traditional list, maybe with some sort of diploma, so it wasn't so different.
And, I remember I graduated from high school 50 years ago this June, and I remember it seemed to me that it was, well, they had shop, they had wood shop and mechanical shop, they had mechanical drawing, but there seemed to be a real distinction between, I guess you would call, academic subjects and vocational. But you think about it, Kyle, most of us, well, if I've got an issue with plumbing, I call a plumber. If I've got an issue with electricity, I call an electrician. But it would be great if people who have, I guess what you call academic degrees, knew a little bit about plumbing.
Right. And what we were trying to prevent is that stigma, of course, that comes along with vocational education. Is well, we've got 10% of students that we have trouble with. Let's just send them to vocational school.
That's true.
And we're trying to figure out how to do away with that kind of stigma.
In Europe, vocational education really doesn't have a stigma to it. It's very intense. It's very, very professional, if you will. It's not the same thing. And the reason I know that is I do a bit of freelancing, and one of the magazines I write was a medical magazine, and it deals with orthotists and prosthetists. Prosthetists make artificial limbs, and orthotists make braces. Well, one fellow I talked to was a German, and he said these technical schools, very rigorous academics. He had to know physics, he had to know calculus to be in these schools. And again, the pay is great. And as my wife was talking to one of her students the other day, she said, well, if you need a plumber, a cardiac surgeon is not going to do you any good. That we're all doing something to contribute to the greater good of society. And you're right, the stigma, it should not be there.
Right.
Because, I've been known to write books and teach classes, but I cannot wire a house. I cannot plumb a house. I need people to do that. And I wish you great success in that, because that's a very important part. Another thing, too, is I was thinking the other day, being 67, how many factories we've lost in this area. But yet there will always be a need for plumbers and pipe fitters.
Service.
For service, that's exactly
Absolutely.
Right. And that's something that's really, really important to stress.
We're a service industry.
Yeah. But that's one thing, because, kids graduate from high school or college, and there's really no jobs around here much anymore. But there will always be a need for this. Do you all stress this in your vocational school that, look, if you can stick this out and pass, you'll have a job?
Absolutely.
Well, now, most of your members, I know that you work out of your hall there, are they industrial or construction or?
No, I would say that a majority of them are, but we've probably got several in the chemical plants and that type of setting and powerhouses and things of that nature. But we have several that do HVAC, both industrial and residential, as well as plumbing too.
Mm-hmm. Again, how many family members have you had in Local 184? I know your dad.
Yeah, several. Of course, my father was a member. My brother was a member. My stepfather is a member. My stepbrother is a member. A brother-in-law.
Is that pretty typical?
A cousin.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhat. Probably a lot more so. Many years ago, you don't see as much of it today.
Yeah. And you have women members too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And did Dennis Knoll's daughter graduate from your program?
No, she's currently enrolled.
She's enrolled.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But now she's a college graduate, isn't she?
Yes, and we get a lot of that. Someone that maybe went to college and maybe got a degree that they couldn't put to use, and they come back and apply. My brother had been to college prior to getting an apprenticeship program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Your dad, of course, April 28th is Workers' Memorial Day,
Yeah.
celebrated every year. And your dad was killed in an industrial accident in Calvert City in
1989.
And of course, I like to tell people that our area council hall is the Samuel Henderson building.
Right.
So that's sort of a Workers' Memorial every year. Safety is obviously a big issue with your group.
Yeah.
Your union.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So talk about the safety aspects. How do you teach with that?
Well, in that first year, a lot of people, it's perfectly fine not to have had any prior exposure to our trade. So
do you get many who absolutely have no
absolutely.
clue about this?
I had none.
Just talking to your dad.
Well, and I was 9 when he died, so I mean
Right.
it wasn't.
Well, that's true.
I had welding and stuff in trade school, but as far as my first day on the job was somewhat of a culture shock for me.
Did they kid you?
Oh yeah. There's a bit of that goes on all in good fun.
Yeah.
But just the identification with certain things and confined spaces, and we go through an OSHA training and confined space training and all of that stuff. Before you go back to a welding shop, you're more or less briefed on what is in that particular area and what are the hazards that you could encounter. So safety is taught throughout the course of the class, as at the training facility as well as on the job.
Well, you mentioned the basics of it is I couldn't identify. I mean, I know what a pipe wrench is.
Right.
But do most people who come just, what is that thing?
I mean, you'll have people that may have been, may have worked for a plumber that may not have done any welding, and then you'll have some guys that come in and they're a welder and they've passed a welding test, but they've never done any plumbing or HVAC or.
So you all teach all of that?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Because I think about when we were kids, we'd watch them build a house. We'd watch plumbers out there with the lead pots.
Cast iron.
And all that stuff. And I thought, well, of course, when I was a kid, the only air conditioning was window units. Mm-hmm. So as you go along, you have to pick up these extra trades.
And times are constantly changing.
Oh, yeah.
So, you have to keep up with the times. That's for sure.
Wow. So after you go through the program, you're an apprentice, then you become a journeyman. Mm-hmm. Then after that, you obviously have continuing education.
Yes.
How does
depending on your licenses, if you that which is all determined by the legislature. So,
right.
Who knows?
Yeah, that's true. So you're licensed after you complete this 5-year program. You're licensed as a what?
No, you take if you're a plumber, you take your plumbing license test, journeyman, and then a master if that's what you want to do. Same with HVAC.
So that's a separate certification.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because I wondered if that would be quite.
As far as medical gas, and we've got welding certifications and stuff like that too. So
yeah.
Depending on which avenue that you choose to go down.
Okay. Well, you mentioned confined spaces. You think about crawling up inside ducts and things like that stuff.
Well, like in a chemical plant, for instance, inside a vessel or a tank or.
Does that bother some people?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you're claustrophobic, this is not
scared of heights. That's.
Yeah, that's the other thing about it. What do you all do for like how do you overcome fear of heights?
I don't think you do. You're either scared of heights or you're not.
So what kind of stuff do you talk about? Building roofs, things like that?
Yeah, and like in a chemical plant or something, you'll see big vessels that have that have pipe on the top of them or something. You may be in a man basket, with on a crane.
Mm-hmm. Is that kind of scary the first time you do it?
It wasn't for me, but for a lot of people, yeah, absolutely. Man lift, being in a lift,
Don't look down.
Well, that's that's everybody has their own way of.
Yeah, that's true, and I think that's, I remember several years ago, Bill Hack, and you knew Bill very well, obviously, who was an iron worker, talked about building television towers. I mean, just the thought of that just completely creeps me out.
Yeah.
But Bill said, you do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, okay. Another thing too, your father-in-law Larry Sanderson, who's been on my program lots of times before, he has a thing where he flips his helmet. Do you know?
Yeah.
Do you know how to do that?
No,
That's something that he did.
I don't want to steal his thunder.
And Larry's was back in the day. Didn't you call them business agents way back
Yeah,
when?
they've the names have changed and.
But a business manager is a business agent.
We have a business manager and a business agent.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
What's the
Yes, sir.
difference?
Business manager usually is the top spot, so to speak, and
It would be like a president of an industrial union.
yeah, you pretty much. And years ago, the president used to serve as in the same capacity as a business agent or a business manager.
Yeah. Okay. And then.
And some locals still do. It all depends on how your local is set up.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said you're charged with $18.99.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Larry, one time on the program, brought me a 50th anniversary Paducah Labor Day program. I guess he's still good. Larry likes history. He's really into history quite a bit. And then recently, you got to introduce Tom Perez and Bernie Sanders in Louisville at a big rally.
Right.
How did you get?
Well, I didn't get to introduce them. I just got to.
You were the opening. You were the
them,
opening
yes.
act, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
How did you get to do that?
I just got a phone call. They are doing this rally.
Unity tour. Yeah.
And I just got a phone call that asked, would I be interested in speaking? And of course, I accepted.
Yeah. Did you get to meet him?
No, I didn't. No.
Really?
No.
So you just were the opening act, and
that's it.
They came out like the warm-up band.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I did see a YouTube program. That's pretty cool to do like that. And of course, Larry always said it all comes down to politics.
Absolutely.
So talk a little bit about that. We have a few minutes left.
Just politics in general.
Well, basically, how politics relate to organized labor. In the context of this recent legislature.
And I'll go ahead and take organized labor kind of out of the equation and say that, I do truly believe in organized labor. I do believe we're the firewall for the working class, and we set the bar. What the legislature can do to organized labor, I look at it as all labor. And what we've seen, of course, we've seen what can happen with this session. And I believe that what we're going to see the next year or two or three, possibly, is just what they can do. And what I mean by that is, of course, stripping away years of progress that have been made by the men and women from labor, organized or not, because it affects us all, and that's the big deal. It's just like the loss of prevailing wage. That affected more non-union workers than it did union workers. It's just like with right to work. People already had the choice to pay dues. They don't want you to believe that, but that's in fact what the law already said. Bottom line is, it's about the low road to low wages, and that's exactly what I hope we don't see. But just like I spoke on that piece there, right to work states have lower wages. They have more workplace accidents, more loss of life in the workplace. It doesn't matter how you put those numbers in your calculator. The number in right to work states is greater. So, that's just we're going to see some other stuff come up like we spoke about before. You're going to see probably some more changes to workers' compensation. on how workers injured on the job site, how they get benefits or maybe do not get benefits. You're going to see that change too. So there's a lot still that could be done. And you know, I just hope I hope that we don't see some of the things that we are anticipating, because they will be very harmful.
And this may not be as big an issue to your local being a skilled trades local, but a lot of industrial union presidents tell me lack of participation on behalf, mostly young people. Do you have that much of a problem?
Yes, somewhat.
So how do you, we haven't got 2 minutes left, but how do you get young people fired up about this and get them to understand this is their livelihood we're talking about?
You have to educate them. You have to educate them through talking to them, but you have to correspond with them by letter or by some means, and let them know what's going on, what's at stake, and we do a pretty good job of that. I will say that they did a study on voter turnout in Kentucky in the last, just with the pipe fitters locals. There's 5 pipe fitter locals in Kentucky. You've got Paducah, Owensboro, Lexington, Louisville, and Ashland. And throughout the state, we had a 57% of our membership voted in the last election, and that was the highest of the 5 locals. So, and the reason for that is because we educate our membership really well. Not saying any better than the others.
Did you get a breakdown on how many voted for the endorsed candidates?
No.
That'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I'd want to see that.
Well, I guess the truth will set you free, even though it's unpleasant sometimes.
Absolutely.
But again, it's this issue of lack of participation.
Yeah.
So on a typical monthly union meeting, what percentage?
We have about 70 or so.
Well, that's terrific.
Yeah.
That's terrific, because a lot of these industrial unions, you're talking 10%.
Right.
So that's great. That's great. So we're almost out of time. Would you like to have any parting comments for
No, I don't.
anybody?
I don't.
If someone's interested in your apprenticeship program, I know July is a little ways away. Can they just call the local hall
we'll give them information. They can call the apprenticeship training school.
And the number at the local hall and the school would be
270-444-6545 is the union hall.
Yeah.
And 270-898-7381 is at the training center.
And either one would be a good place to call.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, thank you. We'll have to come back in and talk more about something else. So, my guest today was Kyle Henderson of Plumbers and Steamfitters Local 184. I'm Barry Craig. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time.